Welcome to the Dear Monday podcast, the purposeful woman's guide to living with faith and intention. We exist to provide a weekly dose of inspiration, mixed with practical tools and tips to help you live on purpose and without apologies. Get ready for thought-provoking, soul-stirring conversations that will help you face a mountain of Mondays with both grace and grit. Here's your host, Rhonda Freeman.
Hello, friends. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Dear Monday podcast. I am your host, Rhonda Freeman. I'm founder and chief encouragement officer at Sanctum and Seed. So I am a dream-chasing, faith-pushing ministry leader and entrepreneur who wants to see you thrive, regardless of the mountain of Mondays staring back at you. So as you heard in the intro, the Dear Monday podcast is here to provide a weekly dose of inspiration mixed with practical tools and tips to help you live on purpose and without apologies. Today's episode is hosted by our brand, Sanctum and Seed. To celebrate the launch of the Dear Monday podcast, we are having a giveaway this week. And for 3 people that follow these instructions, we have something special for you. So here are the instructions. We need you to like our Instagram page. We need you to make a comment on the podcast post for today's episode. And we need you to subscribe to the podcast on any podcast platform. I'll say that again. We need you to follow our page on Instagram. After you follow the page, we need you to make a comment. Whatever the comment is, make a comment on the podcast post for today's episode, and we need you to subscribe to the podcast on any podcast platform. That could be Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever it is that you get podcasts, we need you to subscribe. And here's what you will receive. For those 3 people that follow those instructions, you will receive a copy of the Deborah Arise study book. So if you don't have a copy of the Deborah Arise study book, this is a great treat for you. If you have a copy of Deborah Arise already, then you can gift it to someone else. So what is Deborah Arise all about? It is a study book that highlights the life of Deborah. You've probably heard of Deborah in Judges chapter 4 and 5 of the Bible, but she was the first female judge and prophetess in Israel. Deborah Arise is all about a spiritual awakening for the modern woman of faith, so you and me, where you will learn the art of breakthrough and how to unlock your personal potential. It's the perfect book for a small study group, but it's also great for your own personal study through the Bible. So we hope that you will go and follow those instructions and get yourself a copy of Deborah Arise. The title for today's episode is Reset and Live a Life That Matters. If you listened to our first episode last week, I talked about why I started the Dear Monday podcast, and it was born out of my inner instinct to push back on these villains that I felt were pushing down on me. And I like to call them Mondays. These Mondays were showing up in my life in the form of fear, frustration, self-doubt, anxiety, and this perfectionism syndrome. And what I'd like to tell you is that we are all on this journey to a place called there. So whether there is a short-term or a long-term goal, a dream you're trying to accomplish, or a major life decision, there could be a habit you're trying to break, or even a past you're trying to forget. It could be something you're trying to build, or just the next step in your process. We are all on this journey to a place called there. And we make plans for when we get there. We dream about what life will be like when we get there. This season, I'm sharing tips and insights for your journey to a place called there. When God told me to reset with Sanctum and Seed, I knew that it would require me to face myself, my own limitations, and the negative self-talk that was replaying in my mind like a broken record. And I figured I couldn't be the only woman out there who was in the middle of this transitional season. As a matter of fact, we all collectively are emerging out of a global pandemic that has turned everything upside down. And it has also given us new perspective on how we live our lives. I like to call this our new normal. Newsflash, things are not going back to the way they were. Life has changed things have changed and the world is different now. This is a new normal. So maybe you've already gone through a major reset. I'm going to say good for you. I know it wasn't easy. Maybe you're trying to reset right now and you're trying to figure out how to actually do it. And maybe you don't even realize that that thing that's nagging you, like in the depths of your soul, is God's way of telling you that it's time to reset. It's time to start again, start fresh, make an adjustment, and do it again. So how do you actually reset and live a life that matters? Well, I'm glad you asked. Today, I'm sharing 3 key components that are always evident in a life that matters. And those 3 components are vision, values, and validation. 3 components that I believe are evident in a life that matters and a life that makes a difference. Vision, values, and validation. So first, vision is what you see. So I'm going to ask you, what do you see now and in the future? When you scan over your life, what kind of picture comes to mind? Vision has this way of bringing you into a higher spiritual frequency, this frequency of growth and progress. It calls you to think higher and dream higher and believe higher on a higher level. So I'm going to ask you these 4 words. What do you see? These are the same words that God asked the prophet Jeremiah when he was getting ready to launch Jeremiah out into full-fledged ministry. It's what he asked Jeremiah when he was grooming him for his legacy that he could not have secured on his own. It's the same question that God asked Jeremiah when he wanted to reset his thought pattern. God said, Jeremiah, what do you see? I realize that many of us have been blindsided by life. We've had our share of grief and shame, disappointments, failure, and idleness. And we can't see what's in front of us because we're too busy either looking behind us or we're looking at what happened to us. Or we've put off our dreams and goals because we've grown so comfortable in the routines of life. And it's hard to see anything other than the same old, same old. Am I talking to anybody on today? Well, here's my encouragement. Reset. Reset your vision so that you can live a life that matters. Scripture tells us in Proverbs, where there is no vision, the people perish. That means we fumble around in the dark with no sense of direction. Where is your vision and what do you see? Let me ask you, are you in the building stage of life? Or are you in the growing stage or in the settling stage where you're actually harvesting the seeds that you've planted? Regardless of which season of life you're in, you have to have a clear vision so you know what is and what is to come. It sets your expectation for life. And here's what I know, that if you're not where you want to be, you can visualize something else. And nobody has control over your vision except you. Also, your life will move in the direction that you are able to see. So practice seeing more expansively, practice seeing bigger and broader and further and higher. I like to say it like this. You have to see it in order to see it. Vision is a necessary part of living a life that matters, and I want you to have clear vision. The second main component, I think, that is evident in a life that matters are values. So earlier this year, I was working with a mentee, and we landed on value systems, and it was literally a big aha moment for her. Through our process, she was able to realize that she had placed a lot of value in people and things that didn't hold any real weight in her life. She realized that she had been deeply invested in things that really didn't matter. See, our values define us. They define who we are, who we aspire to be, and what we will see manifested in our lives. When you know and understand your personal value system, nobody can take that from you. So ask yourself, is your life aligned with the values that you hold true? Your core values are the beliefs and convictions that guide your thoughts and behaviors. And most of us have about between 5 and 7 core values. These are the things that are make or break values for us. So to figure out your core values, think about what you really stand for and what is a non-negotiable for you. What are they? Some of us are so caught up in making a point. We have this look at me syndrome where we're trying to prove our worth and our value to other people. But God didn't call us to make a point. He called us to make a difference. And he wants us to live a life that matters. He wants your values to be properly weighted. So if you've been stockpiling on things like approval and acceptance and revenge and the applause of people, sis, it's time to reset so you can live a life that matters. My own personal values are faith, truth, authenticity, peace, and community. Those are my top 5. Faith, truth, authenticity, peace, and community. And what I realize, even in relationship, friendships, and things like that if those things are being challenged, it literally disrupts me at my core. And sometimes, depending on the season of life that I'm in, those values can shift. Something else can move to the top of the list. But who we are at our core, who God has called us to be, we have to understand what we stand for. Because if we are going to live a life that matters, we have to look at those values. Here's what scripture has to say. And you have heard this before, I'm sure. It's in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. I'm going to read it from the Passion Translation. It's really talking about our treasures. And it says at the end that where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. But the Passion Translation says it like this. Don't keep hoarding for yourselves earthly treasures that can be stolen by thieves. Material wealth eventually rusts, decays, and loses its value. It says instead, stockpile heavenly treasures for yourselves that cannot be stolen and will never rust, decay, or lose their value. For your heart will always pursue what you esteem as your treasure. What do you value? And do those values align with where you are now and where you're going? If you're going to live a life that matters, you have to assess your values. The last thing is validation. So if you're going to live a life that matters, you have to understand where your validation comes from. Validation, the definition says the act of finding or testing the truth, accuracy, and authenticity of something. Validation is trying to determine whether something is real or true. So my question is, who or what has validated you as a person? Was it your parents or your childhood friends or those experiences, whether good or bad, that have happened in the past? Or was it your business or your career? Was it success or failure? Or was it your life coach or your spouse or life partner? Who or what has validated you? Validation is such a critical component to resetting your life because it helps you to literally consider the source. You have to stop expecting people to validate you and also your values. Many of us are so disappointed and frustrated in relationships and in friendships because your values are not their values, or you've placed a high value on something that they don't. Life will be so much easier for you when you realize that I don't need them to validate me. I don't need their approval. I don't need their applause. I don't need their acceptance. When you get to the place where you no longer need people to validate you, then you are on your path to being the best version of yourself. Here's what I want you to know on today. You have been chosen by God. You've been handpicked by Him. You have been tailor-made for a story that only you can tell. You've been healed. You've been redeemed. You are loved. You are worthy. You are forgiven. You are a force to be reckoned with. You're a chosen vessel, and you are deserving of all the good that life has to offer. And all of this, not because I said so, but because God said so. And He is the only one whose validation you need. I want you to walk in that. And when the movie of your life is over, let me just tell you that there's only one name that should roll across those credits. God, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Shalom, Abba Father, Jehovah Rapha, your healer, your comforter, your redeemer. He and He alone gets all of the credit. Wow. Friends, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about this podcast. Is any of this resonating with you? Let me know. Send me a DM on our Instagram page at Sanctum and Seed. You can also send me an email at contact@sanctumandseed.com. Contact@sanctumandseed. And I like to end every podcast with an affirmation or some words to live by. So repeat after me. I am a visionary. What I see for my life has been shaped by what I value the most. Today, I acknowledge that my values are in perfect alignment with who I am, and I don't need anyone other than God to validate me. And it is so. I'd like to thank you so much for joining me on today. I will see you next Monday right here on the Dear Monday podcast. Cheers and have a fantastic rest of the week. God bless you.
You've been listening to Dear Monday with Rhonda Freeman. Please join us on Mondays for new episodes. Subscribe and connect with us on social media at Sanctum and Seed. See you next Monday.